Hi, welcome back to the Dylan Rounds case. Welcome if you're currently here in the live premiere, appreciate it. Today we're continuing on with the deep, important discussions like how we did yesterday. As well today, be sharing with you some additional news from the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook group to do with updates on searches for Dylan Rounds as told by Candice Cooley. And as well, we're going to have another brief look at weather reports in different locations, but they're still somewhat relevant and significant because the likes of Don Hatley could be involved and impacted in some way. And it's how you think and predict what could happen next. Could it lead to moving away, going elsewhere temporarily? Does Justin Rounds know? With Justin having his eyes on Don recently, you don't want to lose sight of the individual, okay? Sounds like a mouthful, sounds like quite a lot, but we're going to get through it bit by bit today. We're going to analyse if necessary and make sense of each talking point. So it's all under control. As we do go along, feel free to share your thoughts, opinions, reactions in the chat box. And yeah, as for yesterday's video, we can check back the comments first of all to understand them. I will put as like a little acknowledgement, heads up, there are a lot of comments, okay, to get through. When I checked this morning, there was about 92 notifications, maybe as many as Betty Hayward's phone notifications, I don't know, but you get the idea. Very important points, though, very important questions and comments. That's why we need to get through that, continue what we were doing last night, which was equally, if not more important. If you don't know what happened last night, you didn't watch the video, I'll provide a link down below in the pinned comment section. Be sure to check it out and, you know, catch up on missed stuff. In brief, just as a little hint, so you know what it's about, it was to do with possible hiding spots within the Grainshed property and tying it in with the whole spring cleaning. Really coming to grips and understanding points, referring and reiterating, you know, certain moments which have kind of faded away with time, right? So it's very important to acknowledge these things, or because other people don't, other channels end up moving on. So be sure to check my previous video out, it's important. And feel free to stick around for the rest of this video too, in between, to fully understand what's going on, okay? Also, shout out to Cut and Shoot last night. It was very good of her with the gifted memberships towards some of the people out there. That's all good. I think I'm edging ever so closer to the next custom emoji slot being unlocked. So that'll be good. It'll be interesting to see what type of designs I come up with next, right? So if there's any personal ones that need to be done, or like a general one everyone can use and like, okay? So there's a bit going on, but it's fine. We've got the pace going. And as said, we'll start with the comments first of all in this video, just to allow people to join on in and to catch up with stuff, okay? Here we are, and we'll just adjust it to the newest, and we can start from the bottom. So fair few comments to get through. There we go. So one of the points by me, one of my deeper videos, of course it was, you're going to be up all night trying to digest this overload of comments in your next stream. Sorry. So that might be a fair point, that by Brad. Shout out to Brad, a newish viewer who's come along. So that's good. Is what I mean, as like Tom said, different points of views and fresh faces. This is like a good example of it, right? So we'll see what Brad has to say, and if there's any questions that need to be answered, I'll try and do that. Cleo, great video. Happy to see you received that focus time today. Yeah, of course, when there is time for focus, when there is need for it, there will be focus, right? Always make sure to do that. Specifically with the very important videos like the one last night. And just as a heads up to people, the video what I did last night, absolutely no script, no notes were used at all. It was all done on the spot, on the flow, literally. No words, no script at all. That's why I surprised myself as how deep one could go on such a, well, singular event, right? First comment by Brad saying, cheers. Question, Does anyone know the location of Dan Iverson's farm? And was it confirmed that Dylan Rounds visited Dan Iverson on his way home Friday to drop off a tractor part? A phone call or face-to-face, I can't recall. On Friday, 3 p.m, Dylan allegedly said he was on his way there to Dan's, later returning home and starting seeding or tractor work into the evening on Friday. And shout out to Tom, who answered a few questions. Okay. So, I think roughly what Brad is talking about is something we have covered in a previous video. We didn't do a dedicated video to it, but it was just a few loose notes laying about. We'll just see what the replies are first of all. I do remember the time on Friday, 10 a.m. Dylan went somewhere, maybe Burley, Idaho, to get parts at Cal Ranch Superstore or an area nearby there, to later return back and then go to Dan Iverson's place. And that was a Friday in May 2022, which would have been the 27th. Let's just see what the replies are, just in case any mistakes were made by me. I said, be sure in the chat to fill in the blanks or add your own points, okay? Tom saying, I believe that Taylina said he left for Dan's at about 10 in the morning. There we go. Boom. I was partially right. Okay. Left for Dan's at about 10 in the morning. As for the location of Dan Iverson's farm, I don't know where it is. There's a possibility I've hovered over it, when I've been doing my analysis on the maps, but I wouldn't have known at the time. But if anyone does have the coordinates or maybe the name of the road leading up to the farm, then maybe we can take a look at it. Okay? My question would be, was Dan Iverson ever interviewed in the Dylan Rounds case? Does anyone know? If anyone knows in the chat, say yes. If not, say no. If you don't know, just say I don't know. Is it easier to do it as a poll? Maybe it's best to do it as a poll to kick things off so it doesn't flood the chat too much. The poll being, was Dan Iverson ever interviewed? Yes, no. If he wasn't, then maybe the third or fourth voting option could be no, but needs to be done. Okay, so there you go. It's like a 2-in-1 poll on a condition by it hasn't happened. Does it need to? Make sure to vote right now. Brad saying, yes, there are 2 timestamps from different people on Friday. 10 a.m. he was in Montello leaving, but that doesn't mean he went straight there. 3 p.m. Dylan mentions to John on the phone he had been to Burley and was on the way to Dan's. I heard that story. Okay. Suggestive of a wild guess, 4-hour round trip to Burley to get parts. Is Taylina a worker in Montello? Right. Okay, 2 timestamps from 2 different people. Quick question, counter question to this question. Why are we getting 2 different accounts of stories on a semi-meaningless event which happened? You hear what I said? Semi. Not 100%, but kinda. Tom, Taylina is Kurt Wadsworth's daughter. Yeah, rings a bell. And speaking of which, just to fill in from what some people said last night, when we were looking at the Glorindellen footage of when she was there, Salty Pancakes was there, Kurt Wadsworth was there, people said that the guy in that dark blue top with the bald head and sunglasses on was Taylina's husband, supposedly. So I guess that might clear up some confusion for some, maybe. 2 different timestamps, 2 different events. By the title of this video as well, although some of this deep discussion could be very important, it's kind of like loose talk at the moment because there's a lot going on. If we can focus on very specific events in the future, looking back, that's what we will do, okay? So, before we go any further, I just want to say to everyone watching, There might be a lot talked about here, there might be a lot to process, but we can always return back to it and do singular focused videos on events, because we already did that with the likes of the 24th of May 2022 when Dylan supposedly went to Burley, Idaho to buy some new clothes at Cal Ranch Superstore, supposedly. So we've done something like that. We've done the 25th extensively and deeply, rounding it all off, adding in from what Weezer said with her points. So we've proven it can be done. Maybe we can do it again. Right, so that part done. Was there anything I needed to answer from the original point here? Does anyone know the location of Dan's farm? I don't personally, but if anyone in chat does, feel free to leave coordinates or something. When it confirmed, I can't recall. Okay, they said he was on the way to Dan's, later return home. Right, okay. Brad also saying 10 responses, wow. Also, if I'm not mistaken on the approximate times, Dylan Rounds allegedly saw Kurt Wadsworth at 10 a.m. Friday in Montello, pointing out that he had cleaned his car and was off to see Dan. Right. Dylan saw Kurt. Right. Pointing out. Who pointing out? Kurt pointing out or Dylan pointing out that he had cleaned his car? Oh, Dylan pointing out. Yeah, we heard about Dylan cleaning it down a day before. Right, I get that. And was off to see Dan. I don't understand, why would you clean your car down when you're going off road and within that type of environment constantly? It's only going to get dirty again. I don't understand why you'd bother cleaning it. Anyway, Brad says, but at 3 p.m, roughly 5 hours later, Dylan spoke to someone. Could it be Ed Harshbarger or John? I can't recall. Quick question, Brad. When you say the name John, who is John? John Sheldon? Is that the person you're talking about? Or is it a different John? Anyway, saying, on the phone saying he'd been to Burley to get a tractor part for Dan and was on his way there. Yeah, I heard that part mentioned by Tom previously. Apparently, Dylan Rounds filled up in Montello Thursday night and stayed there the night in Kurt's trailer before leaving at 10 a.m. If Dylan went to Burley in the 5 hours after 10 a.m, which fits the timeline, then he would have to have filled up in Montello or somewhere again for Candice to be correct on the 65-mile fuel estimate. Otherwise, what did he do for 5 hours? Yeah, okay. Let me know your thoughts in the chat. You know, what do you think Dylan did? Or what else Dylan could have done within a 5 hour period? Oh yeah, just check the responses. Tom saying Candice has led us astray before. I guess if Candice Cooley has been estimating, and that's what she did say, she was estimating the distance mileage to about 65 miles. Well, if Candice Cooley estimates, she has estimated incorrectly in the past, and even when she's made statements have turned out to be incorrect, like with Montello when they said they had a 500% sale boost and it was far from it, the complete opposite, going downhill. So Candice Cooley got that wrong. As well as Candice Cooley also saying that no one from Luton or Montello has been arrested under certain charges to do with inappropriate stuff towards a person of a younger age, but that actually did happen. So Candice Cooley got that wrong as well, right? Candice Cooley isn't from the area, so she won't know everything. You got to understand that, and I'm sure she's aware too. But some of the things she has said, and even to do with the case, she wasn't there when Dylan was taken out or disposed of. So she's just basing it off what she knows and what she's heard and stuff, and it's not always going to be right. So that's why Tom is cautious, in case you're wondering. Saying Dylan called John. Who's John? John Sheldon? Brad, withheld evidence and a lie or to cover that. I will never be in her shoes, but I feel like I wouldn't want everyone searching in a potential hot zone either. Just have to give benefit of doubt till new evidence is released. They have the phone pings on Thursday and Friday but have not released them. Justin did say the phone pings showed that Dylan was working at his farm Friday night. Well, to be honest, we already knew this stuff, but if there are phone pings and bits of evidence just to prove and reinforce that Dylan was in fact there, then that's always a good thing, right? What we do need to acknowledge is back in the past, from what we heard, it was witnesses in the area that acknowledged that someone unknown to them at the time, which Candice Cooley confirmed to them that it most likely was Dylan. The witnesses, don't know who they were, a couple, not Walt and Michelle, different people. They were hiking and camping around Little Pigeon Mountains on the Friday, setting up camp, getting ready to go to sleep. They've got a good view and look over in the distance towards the likes of Dylan's farm, and they saw that the lights were on, that a tractor equipment was being used, late night farming. The timing of it occurred at 11:30 p.m. to 11:45 p.m, right? Not that long, but what happened, right? So it was confirmed by them, the witnesses. They even wrote a letter to Candice Cooley describing their experience, etc. Candice Cooley reposted it on the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page, right? And now there's what Tom's saying about the phone pings, which may have not been released or talked about as much publicly, back up that Dylan was at his farm late at night, right? And some of you could think, what was the point? What was the whole point of doing all that farming late at night? Well, if Dylan was busy throughout the day, morning time, afternoon, it's kind of like last minute stuff, right? Getting on with his farm work. Willing to do it so late at night because it's his passion, it's important, and because of the weather the next day. If Dylan knew that rain was coming on in, he would have already made that decision and planned that he was going to park the grain truck in the grain shed the following day. But in between now till then, I might as well do a bit of planting, seeding, because it might as well be done. Not all can be done right now, but I'll do as much as I can. Probably what was going through Dylan Round's head at the time, right? Brad saying, which corroborates campers witnessing lights from his farm tractor or similar Friday evening. True. Yes, that's what I said just then. Christy, phone pings mean that the phone was in a certain place, not the person. We don't have to forget that. I guess what you could argue, if the phone ping slightly moves about from one area to another within the same space, then you could say, well, the phone's on someone at the time for it to be moving about slightly. If the phone was simply left in the truck, pickup truck or trailer, it's going to be stationary. So I understand. It's like with the phone pings of Dylan's phone the day after, on the 28th, it did move about, right? And one of the timestamps after 7:27, 7:43 a.m, and then going on to the farm of Dylan's, and then being there for about 30 minutes, then returning back to the grain shed property, and I think that was 8:03 a.m. So that was an example of Dylan's phone, although maybe not in Dylan's possession, was in possession of someone else for the phone to be moving from one spot to another, right? I mean, when Dylan was supposedly doing his farming on the 27th, Friday night, right? Did Dylan have his phone in his pocket whilst he was in his tractor getting on with stuff? Maybe. I mean, does anyone know where Dylan normally puts his phone? Does he just normally keep it in his pocket like his wallet? Just out of interest, because the wallet of Dylan Rounds still has not been found. The card or none of that, right? Where is the wallet? Well, it could be on Dylan, and because they haven't found Dylan, they've not found the wallet. That's the way I see things, right? But does anyone know how Dylan would be with his phone? Because I'm sure he would take his phone with him most places he goes to, so he's able to make contact with people, whether it be farm-related work, asking for a favour, calling family, updating people throughout the day, whatever. Probably the phone is high priority in Dylan's case, and as well, I guess, wallet and card, so transactions can be made. Yeah. What else do we have? Evidence would suggest that any ping before Dylan's last voice call, approximately 7 a.m. Friday, was in Dylan's possession. After the 7:27 a.m. timestamp, you can presume. Yeah, true. We can't prove, though the police can and have fairly strong evidence that Brenner had the phone from 7:27 a.m. till its last ping that day at 2:30 p.m. from when Brenner drove to Don's, confirmed by Brenner in police questioning. Yeah, I get that. Kind of like what I said before. More of this is fact than what we have access to, such as phone ping, locations and times. Authorities can absolutely tell approximate direction the phone headed or was heading with each ping with technology I certainly don't have access to. Would anyone who knew this data decide to focus on a different area to search when the best efforts are being made behind the scenes to follow an evidential crumb trail? Was that all the comments read there? Yes. Okay. What else do we have? Brad again. Understanding the timeline 26th to 27th will likely help work out a more accurate distance that Dylan's truck travelled after he arrived at the shed. When you say arrived at the shed, are you referring to the grain truck or Dylan's pickup truck? Because from the 26th to the 27th, I didn't think Dylan took his pickup truck down to the grain shed property. I've not heard of that before. I mean, one thing to acknowledge, when Dylan got his seed, which supposedly was the 16th of May 2022, somewhere around that, Burley, Idaho, Dylan went down there to get the seeds. Most likely that was in his grain truck. That distance covered there. So wherever he went, whether it be a store, some kind of more industrial place, filled the truck up with the seed, pay for it, and then return back. And that's distance covered in the grain truck, right? The grain truck likely wasn't used in the disposal of Dylan rounds. So arguably, the previous distance covered in that truck isn't as relevant compared to Dylan's pickup truck, which was used previous by Dylan and possibly used during the disposal of Dylan rounds by another individual. But still, arguably, it's a little back and forth still to this day, with people that believe it was used and others that think it wasn't touched at all. You know, it kind of varies. Still, there's a level of uncertainty. Tom here says, Corey said Dylan drove to Burley Friday to pick up tractor part. Candice has never mentioned or accounted for that trip to Burley. Brad saying, cheers. Would be good to confirm the time frame between 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. and a time frame Dylan visited Dan with the parts. That still leaves confirming a second fuel stop at Montello if he travelled several hundred miles after fuel stop Thursday. So the reason why these previous days and events, trying to understand the timestamps and the order of things, how stuff played out, the locations, distance, mileage, the reason why it's somewhat relevant to the Dylan Brown's case is if Dylan's truck was used during the disposal, it's like understanding the amount of mileage from what Candice Cooley says. Does it match up with these events and how things could have played out beforehand? And as well, the last 100 miles, which was originally lost, what did that, consist of? How much mileage of that was done in the disposing of Dylan? You know what I'm saying? It'll only be relevant back to a certain point, right? Because if the truck only remembers and records the last 100 miles. After that, it's more unknown of. Though I don't think it matters too much at the end of the day, considering that 100 miles anyway, that was once recorded, was lost regardless. So, what else do we have here? Okay. Move on. Okay, so what do we have here? Dawn Marie. Shout out to Dawn Marie, new viewer. What's in those white bags? So that was to do with what's inside of the grain shed property. Possibly grain or dry food for pigs, chooks or fertilizer. There was one white-ish bag in the grain shed property, but that had like a branding picture of a horse on the front, and it said hay underneath, so it's horse hay for the horse, Briscoe at the time. Might have been the odd empty seed bag or sack on the side as well. Tom saying, that's a decent response, but I was wondering if maybe it was blood-soaked dirt. There is something that just dawned on me. Then all he had to do was dump the dirt anywhere away from the farm, maybe at Lucen Pond where the dogs keep hitting on a spot. Was it Lucen Pond where the dogs kept hitting on a spot? I mean, from my knowledge of what Candice Cooley specifically said, she said there was 2 areas which the dogs did hit on, multiple dogs, over the course of months. That included grain shed property inside, and as well an undisclosed location, an unknown spot which has never been revealed public. So it's still a mystery as to where that spot is. Okay? So are you saying, Tom, that the undisclosed spot is the pond? Or are you talking about something else? Anyway, let's keep moving on. Brad, these bags are definitely strong enough to move dirt, but would need to confirm that bags were actually described. I've heard black bags, white kitchen-style bin bags, but not these plastic Hessian-style bags during the spring clean. So the white kitchen-style bags were described by Candice Cooley, and the black bags were basically by the general public audience that have referred to it that way. Okay? Brad also saying, those bags in picture were present during the time of dog search. I'm assuming they're still there. I guess Tom saying, Candice said that there were white kitchen-style bags. Yes, she did. But people don't believe her and think it's weird, but it's white. Brad responding, if he did that before being stalked and watched by Candice, maybe anything bucket would be easier to lift into truck. Those white bags half filled would weigh more. Still, the kitchen bags could have had general waste mixed with clothing and obvious signs of blood, splattered dirt. The likelihood of tracking what happened to the rubbish after Candice got there is much lower. Brennan knows she is onto him by that stage. Anything before that, he had no idea Dylan's family was onto him. Yeah, and I don't know if it was Brad that said it or someone else, but the possible catalyst which led to Brenner suddenly deciding to do it on June 2nd was because Candice Cooley, like quoting by him, onto Brenner with like coming across the boots near the dirt mound. If Candice Cooley found them kind of early on, it's like it's only a matter of time till they find the other stuff in the shed. So Brenner's like, oh no, I best get on and hurry up. I wasn't expecting this or anticipating it. Yeah, I get that. What else do we have? So another comment by Dawn saying, what is under the chicken coop? Another box, possibly where he was hidden, because everything else is stacked around the edge. Yeah, possible case. Could be something. Yeah, I mean, the reason why things are stacked on top of one another and pushed to the side is simply because there needs to be some form of room to be able to park the grain truck inside the shed. But I guess parking it in there wasn't a regular occurrence, but I guess just it was standard to keep it somewhat open and spacious. You got to remember that Brenner, at the time when the horse was alive, Brenner did own a horse called Briscoe, and the horse stayed inside of the grain shed, right? Maybe not 24/7, but it did stay in there, and maybe overnight as well. That's probably why you see those gates on the side when you walk into the grain shed, one on the right, one on the left. It was most likely used at times probably to keep the horse in from escaping, right? Just being, yeah, that's what I'd say. Brad saying dogs would have picked up on anything in the whole area of the shed and the surroundings. The thing is, Candice Cooley did say that dogs did pick up a scent within the shed, that the dogs did act a certain way as if something was here or was once here. But Candice Cooley also said that no forensics were done. So because of that, there was no big follow-up, right? The other thing is, scent DNA could remain up to a certain point, though the actual physical item or object, whatever, that was there is no longer, because it's all down to timing, right? You think of the spring cleaning, 2nd of June, not too far away from when Dylan was taken out, etc. Whatever taken out of the shed, moved on, disposed of. If dogs came later, they may have, sensed something was here, but direct action wasn't taken quick enough. So that's probably, you could put the point in and say that something was once there, but no longer is. The dogs can pick up on the possibilities that something was once here, but does it really lead to any resolve? No, not really. Not from the looks of it. But yeah, like with what Dawn was referring to answer that back, with the stuff piled on top of one another, the different boxes and buckets, who knows, you could hide things within, behind, around the back, wherever. Hiding spot, I'm sure Brenner would have possibly used it, right? So, yeah. Click that off. Brad, once again, saying, if Kurt Wadsworth said Chase Venstra was holding Dylan hostage, Kurt did say that, but he also said that Robert Aviles was there as well. Okay. And another person said that the psychic that passed the information on to Kurt Wadsworth was Kurt's ex-wife, or something like that. Either wife or ex-wife. If anyone can confirm that, back it up, feel free to do so. Is it major information? Not really, just a little backstory. Let's just continue on with what Brad says. I feel it's likely Kurt Wadsworth had no idea of Brenner's involvement and was so convinced Chase had involvement and a 20k reward being offered 20 minutes before Kurt called the police. I'd say opportunistic behaviour. And also the reason why Kurt probably picked out Chase Venstra, just like how Brenner tried putting the focus and blame on Chase Venstra when Brenner was in Weber County Jail and made a call out to Justin to talk about that stuff, is because both Brenner and Kurt equally dislike Chase Venstra, and supposedly some other locals do as well. And the discussions going about and somewhat of a common consensus for some time in the mid-range days of the case was that Kurt did what he did, shifted the blame elsewhere because he and others disliked the Chase Venstra, Robert Aviles, and they wanted those type of guys out of the place. They were like bad eggs. They didn't belong there. They weren't welcome in the eyes of some people. So, like opportunistic behaviour to get money and at the same time make people get taken away for good. That's how it seemed to slant for some time, okay? Anything else? I could be mistaken, but Kurt was a friend of Dylan's, yep, and was only trying to help him with the benefit of a reward if he was right. Okay. Maybe if Kurt said Brenner had Dylan hostage in the shed, the police would have searched there just the same. Many people in many different cases tried to guess the answers and give false leads in the hope for financial gain, yeah? Just because Kurt lied about Chase doesn't mean Kurt hasn't given Dylan about his messy truck and that Dylan showed him on Friday morning that he had power washed his truck. Even if a rush job missing a few spots, If Brenner washed the truck at Dylan's, it still doesn't discount the statement from Kurt regarding Dylan washing it days earlier. There's still other variables, but considering if Brenner used the truck and he's dumb enough to forget to put the seat back, he was probably also dumb enough to not put fuel in it or take it out of 4x4, or put the fob straight away or do a spring clean until days later when Candice arrived, Kev explains the pathetic look on his face in recent court hearings, a look of shame that he knows he is caught for making too many mistakes and evidence. Why would Brenner be charged otherwise? Yeah, I mean, the thing is with Brenner, there's a level of recklessness when it comes to the disposal of certain evidence in the Dylan Rounds case. But you can also say equally Brenner made the odd, smart-ish decision, such as chucking the phone in the pond, in the mindset that by throwing it in the pond, it kind of destroys evidence. Now, okay, it didn't lead to that, but it's just like a normal thing to do, I guess. If you're in a situation where you are disposing of a phone, chuck it in water or try and do something to break it up. I mean, a more dumb option would be if you got Dylan's phone, threw it on the ground, trod on it, stepped on it, broke it up, and then left it there. That could be considered a bit more reckless because it's in open sight. Whereas in this case, it was in the pond, right? Maybe it could have been chucked in a different pond, a reservoir further afar, yes, but I guess maybe Brenner's a bit lazy, and if Brenner's lazy, that can lead to recklessness. So different factors to add in. From what Brad is saying here is that, like, with Kurt Wadsworth, not everything is a lie. There'll be some genuine points made by Kurt, and, that's probably the case, Brad. The problem is with Kurt Wadsworth, and he doesn't help himself at times, is kind of like with the interview thing, the polygraph test, and he refused to do it. Maybe he feels he's in no position to have to do it, that he is 100% innocent, so why should he do it? But if other people have done it, and a couple of them have come out not getting charged because they're supposedly innocent up to now at least, or so, then why can't Kurt do the same thing? By refusing to do it, you make yourself look more suspicious, as if you're too scared or feel a bit nervous, as if maybe you failed and it instantly makes you guilty, right? So, what, scared of failure, scared of incriminating yourself accidentally? Yeah. If you've got nothing to hide, then it should be okay to do, right? So because of that reluctantness by Kurt Wadsworth, it does make people double think. As well, when Kurt Wadsworth has been drunk on interviews and stuff, and the whole pancakes shenanigans and stuff, it switched and changed the stories and information, right? Some of the viewers on my channel that did watch pancakes channels in the past, the live streams, Kurt Wadsworth talking, they would report back and summarise saying, well, Kurt said this, Kurt said that, but previously he said the complete opposite, so what are we meant to believe? So there'd be times where Kurt Wadsworth could be telling the truth, but then he undoes it by messing up elsewhere. So you can't help but, double think stuff, right? And I still refer back to that point that Kurt Wadsworth Brenner doesn't really like Chase Venstra, and maybe even Robert Aviles, so there's a bit of biasness in terms of that's where we'll try and shift the blame onto them. And like he said, with Kurt Wadsworth being friends with Brenner, and Kurt allowing Brenner to stay with him for a little bit back when Brenner's trailer burnt down in Montello, and even Kurt allowing Dylan to stay in the trailer too, these levels of friendship being displayed and obvious, I get that. But when it comes to friendship, it can lead to being a bit delusional or kind of in denial, possibly. So, as you say, Brad, with Brenner, that there's evidence to suggest that he's involved, of course, and, charged, right? Like what you said at the end where, what was it? He knows he's caught for making too many mistakes, evidence. Why would Brenner be charged otherwise? Yep. So with all that in mind, and yet Kurt Wadsworth's last response from what I heard on one of the Pancake videos interviews, call-ins with Kurt was like, no, Brenner had no part in this. Brenner is 100% innocent. He did not kill Dylan. That's what Kurt Wadsworth last said. Kurt Wadsworth truly believing and feeling very confident that Brenner played no part in it. And yet there's a reasonable amount of evidence to suggest Brenner did play a part, the main part or a side part, whichever, was involved some way or another, if you want to be like that, okay? And yet Kurt Wadsworth still denying it, in denial. Why? Because of the friendship basis and because of being friends with Dylan, that triangular friendship of Kurt Wadsworth cannot process or come to terms understanding that a friend, long-time friend, would take out another friend which he's friends with, and that pain is kind of masked in with the denial, not being able to accept, admit it because it's so much to take in. You get what I'm saying? So sometimes the friendship part and connections with one another can cloud your judgment and make you act out differently at times. And I think that's what we're seeing within the Dylan Rounds case. Do you have any responses here? Not from the looks of it. Brad as well. Okay. It's suggested Ed Harshbarger is wealthy based on assets, yet also allegedly owed people money, unpaid debts. Most farmers owe big debts and rely on crops, livestock to repay. Brenner took Ed's .22 rifle as payment for unpaid work. Correct me if I'm wrong, a 20k reward seems more tempting to Kurt now. The thing is, from what some people have said, and I believe it was Ty Corbin said it in the past on either Jim Terry's channel or somebody else's. It was probably more likely Jim Terry's, right? And Ty Corbin said that Ed Harshbarger is worse than Kurt Wadsworth. That he's kind of like Kurt Wadsworth, but much worse. So I guess that puts things into perspective. What Brad says here is kind of similar to what Skeptical said about owning assets, possibly, being somewhat wealthy in some way, whether it be he himself with the money made, or the family in the background over time. The bit about Brenner taking Ed's .22 rifle from the trailer for unpaid work, that was basically talked about by Kurt Wadsworth in the first or second interview at the beginning between Kurt Wadsworth and Salty Pancakes, that interview on YouTube at the time. So that kind of checks out in a way. Unpaid work, I wasn't really aware that Brenner worked for Ed at some point, but if that's the case, then that's the case. I mean, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary considering Brenner did, work for Dylan at some point previous. So he's got experience there. And maybe that's how, in a way, Ed has been able to make the money, right? Getting people to work for him, but not paying them, and then moving on elsewhere to avoid the backlash, to make profit without having to give much money away. So yeah, there is that. Now, could you say Ed Harshbarger is in a position where he should be arrested for his behaviour, his actions, or lack of them? Yes, no, anyone? We'll do a poll right now. Based off the stories we've heard in the background of Ed being worse than Kurt Wadsworth, do you feel that Ed is in a position where he needs to be arrested for what he's done, how he's treated people, all the financial stuff? Make sure to vote right now. Yes, no, maybe, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what people think. The bit where you say, correct me if I'm wrong, a 20k reward seems more tempting to Kurt now. Wait, are you saying that Kurt Wadsworth worked for Ed and Ed didn't pay Kurt, so Kurt needed money somewhere, so a 20k reward from the Dylan Rounds case was opportunistic behaviour that way? Possibly. But then again, why were some people in the chat last night or the night before saying that Ed Harshbarger, wherever he's at, whether it be in Idaho or in Arizona, supposedly Ed calling Kurt to come on down to work with him? You get what I'm saying? Or was that an attempt made then at whatever point? I don't know how long ago it was now. It'll be after Dylan Rounds went missing, right? Was it an attempt made by Ed to manipulate Kurt Wadsworth to get him to come on down to work for him or to work with him, to get him to get stuff done, but not pay him and screw him over again. And maybe Kurt Wadsworth felt, no, I'm not going to take that offer up. I'm going to ignore it, turn it down because I don't want it happening again. A possibility, maybe. But I just think that 20k reward money at the time was just simply opportunistic behaviour, not really driven by much besides possibility of hatred towards Chase Venstre, Robert Aviles. It's like two birds, one stone. If you are successful and they get taken away, you don't have to deal with them anymore. And as well, you get some money on the sideline. Now, the end result was neither was successful, but down the line, you think about it, Chase Venstre has been taken in by the police for all this time. So there's that. And Robert Aviles as well on different charges. So Kurt Wadsworth still benefited in a way down the line. What else do we have here? Tom saying Ed owed Don money. That's why Don didn't tell the police about the gun from the start. One way of looking at it. But later confirmed it, I assume, from what you said. Makes sense. I also think that eventually the reason why Don told the police eventually was because maybe Don didn't want to get in trouble himself or to get dragged down, so he kind of acted like a snake in the grass to put the blame onto Brenner, possibly, right? You know, you look at Don moved away as well. Ed previous moved away too. There could be backstories behind it as well, escaping from something, right? Cleo, Kitty Time, Mr. X, Serious Focus, Important Topics, that's true. And kind of today as well. Okay, so we've got another comment here. Some of you will be familiar with. Everybody stand up. Get your flags out, the US, because we the people have arrived. We the people, as you know, a very whiny individual. Let's just see the comments here and what's being talked about, okay? Maintain a level of focus once again. We the people say, in the way of actually solving the case, the other big problem is attempting to gain subs, views, profits, etc. from the dismiss of another's loss. It's the most evil and uncharacteristic thing a man could do to another. The term is exploiting another. You title your videos as if the breakthrough answer has been found or delivered, falsely advertised. Then you hold out entire videos as if there is a chance you're still going to provide the secret source they're waiting for, yet jack of answers or significant info comes, if it. Well, once again, we the people, over and over again, you constantly fail to understand the titles. The last video title was Possible Hiding Spot Found. You read it in that tone, it's kind of like a question suggesting the possibilities. You really need to look at the language used in the titles. If it's 100% for definite, 100% confirmed, then it will be worded along that line. That tone of language will be used. That hasn't been the case though. It's been theory-based, ideas, suggestions, possibilities. Has it? Hasn't it? Yes, no, kind of, like. We the people. If you looked back at my Kenny Veach case videos and the titles there, you would truly understand, okay? Because I've got extensive experience with covering other missing people cases. You know, the wording and the language is obviously important. And when people have reported me in the past incorrectly, falsely, slander, whatever, right? It's backfired because realised, specific language was used at the end of the day. So kind of makes the report invalid at the end of it. Okay? Just see what the responses are. Tom Evans responding back to We the People, why do you even bother to watch? There are plenty of YouTube channels that may fit your taste. Okay. Smooth Fishing, I don't see any problem with title saying anything wrong to make you think of a possible hiding place. Maybe you read the title wrong. That's very true. People over time do read the titles wrong. That's not our problem, it's their problem. They've got to reread it and understand. Think before speaking or commenting. Brad says, I think this channel appears to maintain a level of interest based on the titles, but you can't expect to grow by smashing several different formats, subjects into one stream and expect everyone to maintain interest. Genuinely, if you love fishing but hate hockey, it's hard to watch a stream that bounces between the two. Separate the subjects, cover more than one missing person in a stream, pat 20 cats in another stream or channel for that matter. Just honest advice if a channel wants to grow. I do like what Warlike Raph is doing to keep the name of Dylan, raising awareness, even if not solving murders and finding bodies, seems a nice chat community as well. So shout out to Brad. I think for most part of it, he summed it up. The key thing is you could cram a lot into a video, like how everyone else has done within this case community, 5-6 hour long videos, but what does it amount to? A lot of confusion, scratching heads, trying to refer back to where it came from or which video, having to sit through 5 to 6 hours with just to hear a 2-second conversation about a past event. That's not practical. No. That's why, you separate it. And, we the people won't understand, but what happens here, it's like a surgery. And I say that with a high degree of confidence. It's a surgery in which the scalpel is brought in, slice it down the middle, put it into quarters, whatever. Take it away, analyse, make sense, debunk or reinforce with evidence, and then do the same with the rest. And then, down the line, once there is a greater form of knowledge, understanding, you can then piece it all together into one video and go deeper than ever. And that's what we've done countless times already, right? As for the more light-hearted aspects, reality is there's two versions. I think the main one is basically, so there's a great level of focus on the case, and then people can be a bit more loose and more casual with the second part of the video, like last night, because, it's important that focus is maintained for sure. But then it's also important that people can be open as well and do other stuff without feeling like they're under the orders and feel like they've got a dog leash around the neck, because that's how it could be elsewhere, right? So it's trying to eliminate that. And if you add in a bit of lightheartedness in between, it does refresh people's mindsets. If you want people to take it in better, you need to refresh people's minds so then they're active and energized for the next video, right? If it was just constant bombardment of information and text without anything unique in between, people would probably burn out quicker. People have burnt out with time within this case in general. I mean, as like an example, being honest, the Shack lady in the mid days of the case doing 10-hour, 11-hour live streams, sometimes back to back, very full on, very long, very deep, all kinds of bits and bobs talked about, but the stamina, right, ended up going, which is understandable, as well as being busy in the background. And maybe that applied to viewers as well. So it's getting the time efficiency in, so there's enough time for people to talk and make sense of things, the video length, and for the video itself to, just cover reasonable, relevant stuff throughout, okay, to the interest of the people watching. And I think, in a way, you could argue, statistically, it kind of shows, but equally, I'd say that statistically, within the last few months, it went to an all-time low in terms of views, stats, numbers. It went downhill on my channel. And when I saw that, I thought, that is a shame. That is an annoyance. But guess what? There's still a task to do. There are still projects to make, and there are still things to make sense of. Sure, Could go onto Kenny Veach, boom, do an odd video. It might suddenly pop out of nowhere and get 50,000 views. Not guaranteed, but it could. Or do I stick to what I'm somewhat good at and just try and keep the case alive, regardless of the downfall? And that's what I've done. And by keeping up with it, maybe statistically it's gone back up again recently because it's gauged the interest of people. So it shows that you're on the right track. You must be doing something right, but as well, you know, you're looking at stuff which hasn't been covered before, and that's why people are looking into it as well. The reason with the recent cover is possible reasons why Brad has appeared here, and then it's led to him sharing his thoughts and all his comments, which have helped as well. So there is a big domino knock-on positive effect. Okay, so I think it's just fine. Christy, he doesn't watch. He only reads the titles. I mean, that could be a possibility, right? I mean, to be honest, there was the odd salty pancake viewer in the past that would come on here and just read the title without watching the video, and even the odd Jim Terry viewer, and they'd say, oh, that's clickbait. Oh, that's not good. Didn't even watch the video. Didn't even reread the title. That's their problem, right? I clearly explained it to them eventually. The odd idiot did end up deleting the account because they realised, oh, I understand now. I think what we should do is just briefly take a look at We The People, check their playlist, check their channel. Why not? So here's the channel, We The People. We may have checked it before, but it might have been updated since. As for the videos, well, poor video quality, you look at it. As for the audio of the person, it appears to be a male. I thought it was a female in the past, but it appears to be a male who runs this channel. And they do have a bit of a whiny voice, even when they're talking normally. So I hate to imagine what it sounds like when they are screeching at me like a banshee. Okay, is it on the levels of Mr. X whininess? Could be. Let's just check the about section. Folks are BS. Set aside. It's pretty much now or never because these so-called, leaders are making major moves, and if we don't make major adjustments to status, then kiss that goodbye. Is this person part of QAnon or something? I don't know. Let's check the playlist out. Work jams, watch-ends. Oh, watch-ends. Better watch out. Watcher of crazy. FBI released Bigfoot. What would you do? Okay. Baby Bigfoot. Pentagon release UFO report. Okay. Getting technical. A range of different videos. Gambling. You've been following Bob Farrell or something. How to make an ATM spew out money. So we're seeing a bit of a pattern now with that. Take that into mind, okay? Work jams. War pigs. Okay, calm down. We've got psychosocial. House of the Rising Sun. I got stripes. Johnny Cash. Well, so does Dale. He's got striped pajamas. Right, last ride. Old guy with a firearm. Darius wagon wheel. Oh, that's a chocolate, that, in the UK. Wagon wheels. Toby Keith. I love this bar. And you know what? I love Betty Hayward's peach. Real fine and dandy, man. So I don't know what's going on there. When Uncle Bill quit. Uncle Bill? Who cares about Uncle Bill? What about Uncle Ben? Peter Parker wasn't in time to save Uncle Ben. Too busy with pizza time. Robbie, you're fired. Say it louder, Dale. Say it louder, Graham. What else do we have? Paid. Okay, update, bed cage, whatever. So there's a lot of random stuff going on there. My Country Listens. Good for you. And finally, what's this playlist? Online passive money videos. Fail proof. $150 per day. Autopilot methods explained. I dare you to fail. New app pays $700 for free. No work needed. Right, so this is a little bit hypocritical, right? You got we the people calling the likes of my channel out and maybe others down the line on YouTube. Oh, you're profiting. Oh, you're making money. Oh, you're doing this, you're doing that because of the case. And here we go. We got him here complaining whilst also having a playlist of how to make online money, passive videos and fail-proof methods to do it. No work required, no effort. So you complain about money making, and yet you're looking into it yourself without zero work or effort put in or contribution. Wow, that's a little bit hypocritical. We the people. Yet another individual who appears as a hypocrite. And as I always said, when someone appears as a hypocrite, they lose all sense of credibility, and I cannot take them serious. Whether this be the first time or the second time, it's just very telling. So there you go. We the people is now known as we the hypocrites. We are the hypocrites. We don't know what we're doing. We cannot think for ourselves. We can't read titles either. We the people need, watch your crazy's glasses because we need to reread the text. Yeah. I think you need to reread your playlist choices. Anyway, let's move on, okay? We got Brad once again. There is a video showing what looks to be damage on the front end of Dylan's truck that suggests he drove through the gates head on the centre star picket. Okay, yeah, I understand. We did look at footage of that, and it was to do within a news report, whether it be Fox 13 News or ABC4 News Utah, whichever one. It was in the very early days. Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds, explained and said that the damage to the front bumper of Dylan's truck wasn't caused or relevant to when Dylan went missing just before or after or going through the gate, because it was actually done in the past when Dylan was driving and somehow crashed into a pole or like a lamp post. Okay, so that clears that up, but let's just see what else he says. Okay, front grille damage and scuffs across the front of the bonnet consistent with the fence wires mesh, scraping it as drove through straight down the centre of the driveway, hence the bent left side. Okay, hope that makes sense. It contradicts Brenner's statement Dylan backed through the fence. Dylan likely went head on, probably pissed. Okay. The thing is, what you're referring to is Dylan's pickup truck, the Ford F-150 burgundy pickup truck. On the 28th, that wasn't used by Dylan. On the 28th, when Dylan woke up, he went in his grain truck, which is different to the pickup truck. And then that grain truck was driven down to the grain shed property. And from what we've heard of recently, that there was possibly a spare key in the area, then there's chances that that's how Dylan managed to get in. And if that wasn't the case, because the fence, the gate, is so flimsy at the end of the day, and barbed wire is on the side, but barbed wire isn't across the gate, it's just simple wire, you can easily flatten it down and drive over it, which wouldn't really lead to any damage to the grain truck itself. And just to reiterate once again, Dylan's F-150 burgundy pickup truck, Ford brand, damage to the front was caused back in the past when Dylan accidentally crashed into something, okay? And the bit what you mentioned, Brad, about Brenner's story of on the day the 28th when Dylan backed into the gate and caused damage to that would have been if Dylan was in the grain truck, and it would make sense because we've seen the gates inside of the grain shed on the sides, one still in okay condition, but on the left hand side that other gate being propped up and slightly bent, so that could have been caused by Dylan. And it would make sense because if Dylan's in his grain truck trying to reverse it back into the shed, that's how he could have crashed into it, especially if he's in a hurry and he's raced against time to get on with stuff. That can lead to a bit of recklessness. So I think that clears that up. What are the responses quickly? It had been stated, I think, by Candice that front end. Yes, that's true, Tom. We'll leave it open to further comments. Christy, Candice stated a lot of things that are not true. Unfortunately, there's never been a press conference for Dylan, so we have like zero facts. I mean, I'd still say that it's probably caused back in the past, and even if people said, no, it wasn't, at the end of the day, you got to understand that the pickup truck wasn't taken by Dylan to the grain shed property on the 28th. Dylan was using the grain truck because it was the grain truck that needed to be parked in the grain shed, not the pickup, the personal one of Dylan's. Okay? Let's move on. Brad saying Candice Cooley states she retraced the mileage and ended up at a spot that matched 65 miles, nearly spot on. I feel that one of the helicopter flights that Candice went on, she saw evidence of a trail that could be followed from shed to a location that measured up. Coincidence? Some things she hasn't mentioned since then, but states no one is on the same trail as she is. Does anyone remember the wooden ruins they visited right on the border? That's likely somewhere Brenner passed en route Interstate 13 to 50 miles west along wash tracks. Does the flood water head west from Luzon? So there's a possibility that all what was said there, Brad, by you kind of matches up with a couple of my videos in recent time. Now, I don't have the links immediate, but if you go on my playlist, Brad, my Dylan Rounds one, somewhere you'll see the title, more recent video to do with the wash, track marks, location, coordinates revealed. And I think it ties in with this, what you're saying. And it also does tie in with those wooden ruins, which is towards the end of a wash, which is near to the border, branching on to Montello, Nevada, because I actually did come across that on the maps accidentally. Okay, we actually looked at it, we zoomed in on it on the maps, and I even compared it to real-time boots on ground footage photos, which was provided at the time during the big push before winter time in 2022, when Mob Crew Chris, Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds, K9 Unit, Texas Equisearch were down there present in that area where that wooded platform was, as well as the wash itself and following it. And as well, that's the direction where the track marks went in. Now, in recent time, more and more people have been saying that it was supposedly Ivor Zadovsky, the guy at Luton Airport, that caused those tracks. Why? I don't know. Is it 100% confirmed? Not really, but that's the direction it's leading in. Candice Cooley in the past said that those track marks in the wash are kind of similar to Dylan Rounds tracks, tyres, but not 100% confirmed. And really, it's not really been completely talked about since by Candice Cooley, so it is left open. Okay, so hopefully that makes a bit of sense there. Okay, but I can see what Brad is going on about, tying it back in with this whole mileage scenario. What I will say is now, just in case people are scratching their heads, there's a level of heavy depth here, but the reality is down the line, if we are able to make more sense of it, we probably can condense it into key bullet points or key markers on the map and break it down and make it a bit more easier to follow, right? The initial stage is trying to sieve through all the information, make sense of it. Then the next step is filtering out the unnecessary stuff and really focusing on the important factors. And that can happen down the line. If for whatever reason, we can just simply refer back to a previous video I've already covered on this stuff, then we can, if I can find it, I'll provide a link. Tom Evans, this was a well thought out video. That's good to know. Minus the cats and the ninja. Yeah. As well, reality, if I did do a separate video focused on really unrelated stuff, right, the actual outcome of it, being realistic in performance, it would be pretty flat, okay? Not really anyone would watch, but if you're able to incorporate it in a video which people are interested in, then people will be able to see the light-hearted stuff as well. And it was proven last night in a positive, natural way, because the people that were present watching the Dylan Round stuff remained watching when moving on to the cat content. But a fair few of those people that remained probably would have never have come in the first place if it was just a separate cat video, if that makes sense. So there's like a structure to it, of course. What else do we have? Smooth Fishing. A different comment from a different person. Let's see. Any normal parents would do anything to their son to get him home and to give him a proper burial. I think Candice Cooley just wants to drag it on because she loves the attention. When they do find his body, there won't be much more camera time for her. Yeah, I think a few people with time now have referred and called out Candice Cooley for camera time. That's the only reason why she's out there. A couple of people did interpret it recently from when looking back at that coverage, what I did of Justin calling out Candice Cooley through that text conversation, and one of the post being, when does Candice Cooley ever come out? Oh, for the cameras or something. That's how people interpreted it also at the time, maybe. Justin Rounds seems to be out there here and there, right? Weezer has reported it from what she's seen. She's seen Justin out there, but do you see Justin on camera on all these separate independent interviews? No. When Justin is out there searching or assisting someone or looking for aid and clue, does he appear on interviews on camera? Does he record what he does? Does he ask for anyone to record him, be like a personal cameraman? No, none of that happens. It's almost like all action, no camera. All action, less talk, a man of few words. That's how it's mainly been, right? Now, could you then shift it all onto Candice Cooley saying, yeah, she's always on the camera, that's all she does, that's only when she appears, blah, 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 blah. Maybe you could see it that way. I'd say it's good, though, that Candice Cooley, there is at least someone that's willing to go on camera like Candice Cooley, because realistically, and it's been realistic, if you take away Candice Cooley, then you wouldn't have the East Idaho News Channel interviews. You wouldn't have the Heavy D interview. You wouldn't have the interviews with Doug and Candice Cooley. None of that would exist. And basically, you're taking out a big portion of supposed information talked about, right? You can argue Candice Cooley is the one that passes on information from what she's heard of, from what the police has told her. And if she's in a position where she can pass it on, she will. And that's what has happened at times. So if you take her out of the picture and she doesn't do any interviews, then you won't be hearing directly from the police, are you? You always need someone in the middle to trickle down the information and pass it on to the general public. At times, Candice Cooley can be the one to do that, despite the lack of accuracy at times and the odd mistake made, okay? And just simply by Candice Cooley doing what she does, she herself is, in a way, keeping the case alive, of course. Whether it be the presence on Facebook, providing updates there, of course, or if it be on YouTube, right? And obviously, the more people covering the case, I don't know, the more effective it is and kind of easier, right? If there's more people on it, working it out, solving or making sense of stuff, clearing things out. With Justin Rouse, because he's a person of few words and he doesn't really do any interviews, if you had to rely on him, would you be getting much information out of stuff? Maybe not as much, right? Depends how you look at it. What else do we have? Brad? I sense maybe her stubbornness to try and get the maximum harshest penalty instead of trying to work a plea deal and bring her son home. Was there not an attempt on Brenner's behalf to offer details for a lighter sentence? A mother reacts to what stubbornly wanting death penalty, and understandably so. I would want it over with, but to the court system delayed investigations, arrest and continuous due to law. Right, so the thing is, Brad, basically in the past, if we're referring back to the 3rd of March 2023, when Brenner was officially charged with the first degree the first degree murder of Dylan Rounds and the desecration too, right? Shortly after that, followed by a few interviews, Candice Cooley appearing on different shows. And on the East Idaho News one, Candice Cooley and Justin both said that Brenner, at the time, was willing to open up, willing to reveal the location of Dylan Rounds. Some kind of plea, some kind of offer was made, in the whole of that. But Candice Cooley and Justin Rounds denied it, rejected the opportunity of receiving information to where their son is at. And why? Partially because of stubbornness and pride, a conflict between the two. they didn't want to disrespect Dylan's name. They didn't want to shake hands with the devil that caused their son to go in the first place. So why should he have like the final words? Candice Cooley Justin felt confident at the time that they could do it themselves and bring Dylan home. Maybe they still do now, unless some kind of regret is kicking on in with time, you never know. But yeah, they had an opportunity. Brenna was willing to open up and talk back then, months ago. And ever since, not much else has happened. Kind of like what Candice Cooley said, 3 months on, besides the court hearings and adjustments, which haven't got really anywhere, what else has happened? Not much. Brenna still is where he's at. So yeah, you get the idea. So really, time efficiency, Candice Cooley Justin probably should have listened to Brenna, but in more recent time, Candice Cooley referred back to it and gave a different idea and perspective. She was saying how even if we did receive a plea offer deal done in which Brenna reveals this and that, and he gets something out of it too, Candice Cooley said, we probably wouldn't be satisfied with the outcome. That's what she said. Candice Cooley was explaining how in the long term it could be bad, but if Brenna is able to get a reduced sentence, time knocked off, whatever, and there is a chance possibility that Brenna gets released years on, he could then go out and harm somebody else and destroy another family. Candice Cooley doesn't want that to happen. She doesn't want that on her conscience. So I understand it. Basically, you could say Candice Cooley in that moment, like with Justin, being selfless, putting aside their chance of finding their son to protect other families out there down the line in case Brenna does get out because of this whole plea deal offer being made, right? So there's that. Though there has been times where Candice Cooley has complained and called out Brenna for not talking, for not opening up, and so has the followers on Find Dylan Brown's Facebook page. They're the only moments where I think, whoa, hold on a minute, you can't be complaining when there was an opportunity where Brenna was willing to talk and open up. And the only reason why it didn't happen is because you yourself decided to turn it down for a genuine reason. So to be complaining here and there now, it just doesn't quite make sense, right? When you had the choice at the time. That's what I would say, okay? Hopefully that clears that up. Christy, I would fight to make Brenna talk and tell where my son is, but Brenna knows a lot of things about Candice Cooley too. So she seems to accept the fact that she doesn't know where her son is to cover up stuff in her own life. Sounds a bit strange. Brad, I can't see how Brenna's knowledge of any of Candice's private life would have a legal impact on her or the case where debts, child, whatever, or the accusations until proven, just like any theory I've also doesn't point finger at her as involved, though. She appears to firmly believe she's close to finding him, Candice and authorities. Right. So, with time, supposedly, Candice Cooley involved in money embezzlement or something like that. I mean, it was even mentioned on Doug's channel with Candice Cooley about it. They actually talked about it, if some of you remember. You remember Tom Evans? But I don't know if they were shifting the blame onto Justin or something. And I'm sure there was a little bit of talk where they were shifting the blame or saying that that's why Justin tried running Candice Cooley over. But then at some other point previous, Jim Terry started talking about it as well and really highlighted it and maybe exaggerated as well. So a little bit messy, a bit dark grey patches there. But in the past, supposedly a wave of people calling out Candice Cooley. She owed people money from back then with different types of work, right? Not long ago, recently, we checked the comments out of a old Candice Cooley video about 6-7 years ago to do with trucking, which she was involved with at the time, I guess. And there was a comment which was posted very recent saying how I used to work, an ex-worker for Candice Cooley in the trucking stuff, and she owes us money, about 10, 12k, and now we're almost in bankruptcy, and she hasn't given money back. So, seems to be a bit messy. Why would Brenna know about that stuff or know about other shady stuff? Well, the only thing I can think of is because at some point in the past, for like maybe a month or two, when Dylan Rounds and Brenna were doing custom farm work for someone else out there, I guess in Idaho, maybe. But they were actually staying in a trailer round the back of Candice Cooley's house. So with Brenna being nearby, Brenna might have heard a conversation or learnt stuff about Candice Cooley then, and could have been used as a form of blackmail ever since. That's all I'm saying, right? That's just under the conditions that are met here and the possibilities of trying to understand it, okay? What else do we have? Wrangle. So we've got Wrangle, Australian. A whole bunch of old nasty beep around Dylan. This hushburger with borrowing money and never giving it back. A real snake. I'm surprised no one's tried coming up with some kind of conspiracy saying that is Ed and Candice Cooley in on it together with owing money to different people. I'm surprised no one's mentioned that or suggested that. Great video. Shout out to Wrangle. It's good that he's still here. Wrangle is a long-time viewer that was present during the Kenny Veach days and the MK case. Christy, great video. Rafi, a lot of interesting points and great comments too in chat and comment section. I miss Linda. I hope she is well and will be back soon. Oh, Brad once again. Ooh, even longer. Let's see. Is there a chance Dylan smashed the gate down? Probably not. Parked next to the shed. Walked into the shed to move things out the way to make room for the truck, e.g. chair, furniture, etc. And was attacked at the spot that was dug up. Excess blood on ground, sniffed by dogs. Well, supposedly shack lady Candice Howard, who received information from Candice Cooley, said that biological matter was found at that spot. So yeah, maybe Dylan was taken out there. Obviously, it would have had to have been before the grain truck was parked in the shed, of course, because if not, that truck would be obstructing that area where that hole was dug later. Brenna takes phone, cleans hands and gun, whilst thinking of a plan there and then, unknowingly being filmed on Dylan's phone. Brenna then reverses Dylan's truck straight into the shed and loads Dylan up, and off they go straight away. Well, when they checked the grain truck, like checking for DNA and looking through the back of it where the seeds are, they didn't find anything to do with Dylan in that sense, so I don't think it applies there. As well, Dylan's pickup truck would still have been at his farm at this time, so that would mean Brenna would have to go down to Dylan's farm to get a hold of the truck, and Dylan's phone ping of Dylan's phone was down at the, Dylan's farm after 7:27 a.m. after Dylan was killed. So if Brenna's in possession of Dylan's phone and the phone ends up down at Dylan's farm, then Brenna must have gone down to the farm to look about and get a hold of the pickup truck that way, possibly. But how did he get down there in the first place? That's my question, right? Would he have walked down there 5 miles? Not really, because we've seen how he walks in court, right? Bit wonky-legged, bit of a limp, looked to be in pain. I don't think he's going to walk 5 miles, is he? So he would have to have got a vehicle of his own, driven it down to the farm, to then maybe get into a different vehicle, such as Dylan's, and then go back to the shed, pick up Dylan, drive somewhere, dispose of Dylan, drive all the way back to Dylan's farm, clean the truck down, possibly, forget to adjust the seat, has all-wheel drive turned on when it shouldn't be on because it's broken, forgets to, locks the door when he shouldn't because Dylan never did, and then gets back into his original truck to drive back to the grain shed later. That's the way I'd say it, right? Anyway, what else here? Unknowingly being filmed, straight into the shed, loads, okay. But there's also a pinged trip from Brenner's to Dylan's and back to Brenner's from approximately 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. Yeah, that's basically what I said. Candice Cooley said that Brenner spent roughly 30 minutes at Dylan's farm, supposedly, and then moved on. So Brenner may have visited Dylan's and back before loading up Dylan. Or was he in the back by then? The puzzling part is, why did Dylan's phone ping going back home and then back to Brenner's after Dylan is allegedly killed? What would Brenner have wanted to do at Dylan's for 30 minutes at Dylan's before disposing of Dylan? Anything I can think of is Dylan's pistol. He may have taken it whilst quickly visiting Dylan's But that can't be the main reason. He didn't return anything till days later that we know of. Maybe some of the things he stole from Dylan after 7:30 a.m. were actually thrown out in the spring cleaning, e.g. valuables. Maybe, but why take the stuff away from the farm to put into the grain shed of the valuables and then throw them away later? What is the whole point of that? Because they just go to waste. Or is this the whole treasure hunt thing which people were talking about in the past? You never know. But Brad, if you're talking about Brenner going down to the farm, besides the gun, what else would he need? Well, I think, Brad, you referred to something about the key fob earlier on being returned back a few days later. So if you tie it in together, right, going down to the farm, get a hold of the gun out of interest because he likes firearms. If he did the same in a way with the trailer of Ed Harshbarger's stealing that 22 rifle, did the same with Dylan, I guess. But also whilst down there, the seat being adjusted in the truck, maybe to get a hold of the gun inside. But as well, because we know that, well, we supposedly know that the key fob and gun were returned back days later. Why would you need to take the key fob away from the place if you're not going to use the truck? The only reason why you return the key fob back is because there was a use for it originally. And normally, use for a key fob would be to gain access to a vehicle and maybe to drive it on, hence track marks, and using it as well as a form of disposing of Dylan. And if the truck was supposedly washed down later, then you could tie that in too. Though with the natural rain on Saturday and Sunday, that might have been just itself without the additional pressure washing, okay? As well, people do say that the gun and key fob were never taken away, that they were always on Dylan's property, Dylan's farm, never moved. My counterpoint is, and I'll say it here, I'll say it once again, if that really is the case, then why was the gun and key fob cleaned down of all prints? If the likes of Dylan's grain truck can have DNA of both Dylan, Brenner and Don Hatley, that would have all operated it at some time, let's just say, no attempt or effort was used to clean down that evidence or DNA, was it? No. But the gun and key fob was. The gun and key fob arguably used in recent time. Most definitely the key fob, because days before, Dylan going down to Montello, Dylan going to Dan Iverson's, Dylan going to Burley, Idaho. There's a bit of mileage there, the whole mileage with Dylan's truck. So there's mileage with Dylan's pickup truck, the Ford F-150, then obviously the key fob would have had to been used to actually use the truck to get about, meaning if the key fob was used, then there is DNA and fingerprints upon it. So why days later is the key fob suddenly cleaned of all evidence and DNA when we know Dylan Rounds himself personally isn't a hygienic person who does leave things out on the side like food in his trailer? You get what I'm saying? The only reason why you would clean down a key fob and maybe a gun is because you're returning it back and you don't want it to trace back to yourself. So someone like Don Hatley, someone like Brenner would be the type to do that. Though, who exactly between the two? If Brenner is the type of guy to be very reckless in the Dylan Rounds case when disposing and being appropriate with how to handle evidence and where it goes later, does it match up with the gun and key fob being cleaned down? Or could it have been Don Hatley's own doing to try and cover Brenner? Maybe Don Hatley thinks things through more. You know what I'm saying? Even possibilities that if Don Hatley, if he was the one to mastermind it all or the only one involved, maybe he would have done a better job and it would have been harder to trace back overall. Makes you think, doesn't it? Hopefully that answers your stuff, Brad. Well, so I think Brenner was looking for money when he was at Dylan's. Possibly opportunistic behaviour once again. Just opportunistic, looting. So whether a pistol left the trailer. As said, the pistol was cleaned down, so it must have left to be returned back to be cleaned. Because why would Dylan clean it down completely? You know what I'm saying? And as well, even when you clean down an item, when you're handling it and return it back, you can still leave a few prints unless you might be wearing gloves or something whilst cleaning it and also whilst returning it. It's like extra levels of caution. And if you're cautious, then there's got to be a reason for that. Okay? Brad again, ref, I can't imagine Dylan's seed truck was needing to be undercover in the shed all the time unless it had seed or fertilizer in it. Brenner would have used the shed space a bit by looks, table and chairs, beer cans everywhere, clearly not a recycler. Brenner could have moved in it and as he pleased, also besides a pool of blood, neither their DNA proves anything, unfortunately. Even Dylan left the seed out until a last minute weather report. The thing is, On the 28th of May 2022, in the early hours of the morning, maybe about 4 to 5 a.m, around that point or so, it started raining hellaciously, described by those witnesses nearby Little Pigeon Mountain. Dylan would have woken up at whatever time, got into his grain truck, driven it down to the grain shed property, getting to the gate first, and then at 6:51 a.m. making the call to the grandmother. So maybe Dylan was startled, awoken by the heavy rainfall. It was said that Dylan's grain truck had like a bit of cloth over the top of it, so it kept it somewhat dry temporarily, but obviously it needed to be parked inside of the grain shed just so it didn't get soaked, because if it got soaked, seeds would have been ruined, destroyed, waste of money. Not a good situation to be in. And because Dylan takes his farming very serious and he's passionate, he's going to do whatever it takes, right? Do we see the responses? Seed truck did have seed that needed to be protected. True. Peaches. Shout out to Peaches McGee. A new, interesting viewer that's got a profile picture of apples. I actually have an apple by the side of me right now. I'm going to take a bite out of it later, but I'm only going to have one because when I have two apples, my body doesn't respond well to it, okay? As well as a few little bits and bobs upon the apple, a few little added extra boost things that could explain why my stamina is at an all-time high. Well done. So Peaches McGee, I'm sure Betty Hayward would be proud of this individual. So shout out to Peaches McGee. There we go. Saying the entire video was great. The beginning was very informative and the cat was beautiful. And the later part was the funniest thing I've ever laid my eyes on. Woo! I've watched it a total of 6 times so far. Love, 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 love it. There we go. So absolutely hilarious. Thank you. You're welcome, Peaches McGee. It's good that you were able to maintain focus as well as having fun at the same time or shortly after. So we got the balance down there, the structuring of the video. That was all done well. So that's good. And found it fun. So that's good to be able to maybe escape away from the darkness at times or the other petty stuff in the background. So shout out to Peaches. Just peach everywhere. There we go, lots of peaches. I need to still try it, don't I? Jacqueline saying, I would look in the chicken coop, but I'm naturally nosy. Yes, I remember what Tom Evans said. I noticed stuff missing on the shelves. Okay, that's good to know. It's good that you remember it as well. It does look like someone checked the chicken coop with the door being open, and you could say maybe it was always left open, but to be honest, if the fitting was a little bit tight and narrow getting in the grain truck into the shed, most likely that door on the chicken coop would have been kept closed so it didn't catch against the truck when reversing in. So that would mean that possibly later on, after Dylan being taken out and days following, someone did check inside of the chicken coop to look for possible stuff. Maybe when the dogs eventually came on in, the dogs may have ended up jumping up at that area and sniffing it out and checking inside, possibly. But of course, by then, too late, because spring cleaning already took place. But the scent trace was once there. Thing is, though, supposedly forensics never used, so it didn't really come to much of a head, unfortunately. And finally, Jacqueline also saying more effort was needed early on. CCTV footage for Brenner should have been checked out. That's true. So, we've reached the end of the comments for the intro of this video. Oh no. Right, so with that aside, just so you know, that was the intro of this video, in case you're wondering. Shout out to the people who are still here watching. If you have suddenly joined, welcome. We are about to talk about the main part of this video. If you are interested in rewinding back to see the recent important conversations and discussions on the case, make sure to do so. As said, I do have an apple with me right now. It's on the small size, but then again, you could say the same thing about Dale's wonky chest. It's just one of those things. And also, poor Dale last night being ghosted, rejected by the kitty cat. Don't worry, there's plenty more cats in the sea. maybe that's not always a good thing. You don't want a soggy cat, do you? But you can always dry it off, rub it down, fine Dale. There's more chances, okay? To be honest, that dinosaur last night of Dale kind of reminded me of the T-Rex from Toy Stories. So that explains where Dale originated from. Dale starred in Toy Stories as the dinosaur. It's done. Anyway, as I said, we need to focus on the recent updates of the Dylan Rounds case. Just a bit of a backstory. What we're going to do right now, we're going to go onto Facebook. We're going to go on the Find Dylan Rounds page and see what Candice Cooley has posted recently. But I believe more so what the questions, the questions by people asking about stuff and Candice responding. So we'll take a look at that. And then we can move on to a bit more about the weather report roughly in the area, okay? Here we are on the Find Dylan Rounds Facebook page. We're just going to go through post by post the questions and see what the answers are. So 20 hours ago, this person on screen said, has anything happened as far as prosecuting the Jack Beep accused of Dylan's murder? I'm sorry for the language, but that animal deserves no respect. We'll just check the comment, see who responded. Candice Cooley saying, we are still waiting for Brenner to be arraigned. I think that's to do with the attorneys because they're still figuring that out, and maybe it might come to a head on the 31st of July, hopefully, and then more steps can be made after that. If not, it's just going to keep being dragged out, right? I mean, you got to understand, just get rid of that, just give me a second, hide that, there we go, so it doesn't get in the way. But as you saw, that other tab said Idaho 4, because with the Idaho 4 case, although I don't really follow it, you've got like delays there with the court. The defense team, but supposedly the state has possible evidence alibi which could prove Brian Kohberger's innocence, but it's not been handed over yet. So there's a bit of delaying and stalling. So that's not really helpful. I think they said the next court appearance case thing is the 2nd of October, which is quite some time off, right? So you see like a crossover with some of these being pushed, dragged out. So that's the first one, okay? What else do we have? What's this one? Some person saying, hi all, I'm a new member, but a very long time supporter of Justice for Dylan. As previously mentioned, I'm new to this page. I'm not even sure how to go about saying this, but my sister and I were blessed to do a little oven cooking for the search and rescue party for Dylan. I'm sure to offer more of my even cooking for charity Dylan Rounds group would support. If I can be of any assistance, please let me know. I never stop praying, loving and believing. Right, okay, so this person kind of like supported the search and rescue party when looking for Dylan, providing them, what, food? I guess so. My question is, when did this happen? Was this for a recent search party in the search for Dylan Rounds this summer? Or was it back in 2022, summertime? Not quite sure, but, it's just people sharing their experience and their involvement in some way or another. Justin Rounds leaves a comment saying, that was awesome of you guys to come out that day. It was very good. Thank you. But what day? Are we talking about 2023 or are we talking about 2022? I'm not too sure. Sorry for hijacking this post. Okay. Well, we've got a different point of view, different perspective from groups of people involved out there at some point. Then we got this person here 20 hours ago asking the question, are they still searching? Check the comments. Hate it when that pops up. Responses, Candice Cooley, we will never quit searching. I mean, it's kind of like an obvious response you would get, but I think it's more so, are you searching right now? As of like today, upcoming, previous week, I think that's what the person meant. Okay, I just can't believe he hasn't been found. There are lots of places he could be, big country where Dylan was. Sadly, it's very vast out there and millions of places he could be. They'll find him. I was hopeful he would be found a lot sooner. There's chances that he could have been found sooner if possible burial spots were checked quicker, if certain areas where forensics were actually done, if certain equipment wasn't delayed, like the Bloodhound group or the drone operators, if all that took place in the early days, if not in the first week, maybe it could have led to a greater success rate, right? And as well, if people checked the grain shed before the spring cleaning, then maybe more evidence could have been found too. So there's a lot of unfortunate circumstances. Even like the mileage on the Ford F-150, Dylan's personal pickup truck, that was lost as well. So that's kind of annoying. Yeah. I know that. Yeah. They'll never quit. True. And when they can't find him, they'll start again from the beginning, because that's all they can really do. Candice, I've been following Dylan's case since it was first posted on Facebook, and I've always wanted to do something, anything to help find Dylan and get him home to you and his family. I hope you don't mind, but I've taken upon myself to submit a donation and request to the Marian Fathers of Immaculate Conception in Stockbridge Mass, right, for a mass especially for Dylan and his family to be held on the last Saturday of each month beginning this month for an entire year. Please, to you and your entire readers, it's not my intention to infringe my beliefs on you or anyone else, just a small way that I would like to help you. Okay. Amazing gesture. Yes, the man who was squatting has been officially charged with his murder as far as him physically now. Yeah, he was officially charged March the 3rd, 2023, okay? Classified as squatting, but many people more now say he wasn't squatting, that he was appointed there, he was allowed to be there as like a caretaker role. So as you see, it varies once again. It says, and thank goodness they didn't need Dylan to officially charge him with his murderer due to the substantial evidence they found. Yeah, like the 7:27 timestamp AM. Video recording from Dylan's phone, deep forensic dive. Found that to do with Brenner with the blood on him, cleaning a gun down. Mindy. A man here in Ohio is in prison and has been for years. He murdered his girlfriend. To this day, her body has never been found. Carrie Culberson is her name. I'm glad they can prosecute without his body. So it was a success there. Okay, so it could be in the Dylan Rounds case as well. Well, still, they want to retrieve Dylan, of course, for the just sake of bringing him back home, so the family can bring closure and kind of like heal and eventually move forwards as well. So there is greater importance there. Anyone in the chat, have you heard of Carrie Culberson? Let me know. Tessie saying same with Susan Powell. Susan Powell stands out, doesn't it? I've heard of that name here and there. Heavy D's covered it. Scott Natal has covered it a fair bit as well, besides looking for Kenny Veach and Dylan. Yeah. So sad. Why couldn't they just give up the whereabouts? Nobody paid for a murder either. Only a boy's got murdered by a husband. Yeah. So even if the children knew about it or knew the location because they were taken down with the murderer, it's kind of like the secret goes to the grave in a way, which is a bit rough. What else? Has it been thought that Dylan could have been taken away from the property the day Brenner was doing spring cleaning and brought to wherever trash and garbage is dumped, wherever that area is? Can and will that area be searched? Good point. Unfortunately, no one tracked down Brenner or Don Hatley wherever they went when maybe disposing of that stuff. So it's problematic. As well, if Dylan was taken with the trash during the spring cleaning, then obviously Dylan would have had to been chopped up to be put in those bin bags, right? Literally chopped up. Anything else? I just looked up there is a food tactic called Nutriloaf, tasteless prison food for disciplinary actions to inmates. Why can't this be requested so that Brenner has incentive to confess to where he disposed of the body? Look it up. Nutriloaf for inmates. The judicial system needs to work with families to use tactics to aid families. Laws need to change. A loaf of bread? Tasteless prison food. It's like a bargaining chip. I'll be honest with you. I mean, what does Brenner favour more? What does he think is more important to him? Food or alcohol? If, Brenner was willing to go 30 days without food. He went on a 30-day hunger strike. He managed it. Resilient against no food, right? So if he was offered this tasteless prison food, I don't think it would faze him one bit. Because Brenner technically has already overcome a bigger obstacle in his life, and that's withdrawal from alcohol. Supposedly Brenner is an alcoholic, consumes a fair bit of alcohol, may have been drunk at times, then to suddenly be taken into Weber County Jail and stripped of alcohol, not to have it ever again whilst he's in there, is a big shock to the body. Yet he managed, right? He managed. And he has got somewhat healthier since and lost weight. So to be honest, if you used to give him tasteless bread, I think you'd be like, so what? I've not got my alcohol, so, it's not that bad. Anything else? Tasteless actually wouldn't be a punishment since prison for taste is nasty. Right. You should do research on false confessions. Do you want justice or a witch hunt that burns innocent people at the stake? Oh. I'm not saying Brenner is innocent. I'm simply saying that using tactics to force confessions has never and will never be just. Therefore, it can never be part of justice. Unless it's outside of the box and wasn't conducted in prison. Like if a confession was forced before Brenner was arrested. Well, that never happened, did it? Is that it for the comments? Oh, okay. Do we have anything else further on up? No, that appears to be it. So what I want to move on to now kind of relates more to Don Hatley, okay? We've heard Don Hatley lives in Casper, a city in Wyoming. Don Hatley being an individual may be a key witness in the Dylan Rounds case. Why did he go down to Casper? Not really sure. Supposedly family is down there, so that could be one of the reasons, but what really made him move? Was it because Brenner being taken away, he's got no one else around him? That's a possibility, and maybe to get away from everything, especially if he is a witness, okay, to maintain a bit of safety. But of course, he's appeared on Justin's radar a couple of times, Justin Rounds, calling out Don Hatley at times, if you remember, back in 2022 and 2023. So it's not changed there, there's been a consistency, okay? Is Justin willing to go down to Casper and speak with Don Hatley, or to, as he said in quotes, spill his guts? I don't know. Maybe Candice Cooley holds him back, restrains him, cools him off. Maybe. But the reason why we're talking about it today, because we're tying in line recent events which have gone on, the weather. We've seen with Montello, Nevada, one of the Montello locals known as Weezer, floods there, has kind of drained off since, but more rain ahead, so it could flood once again, okay? They weren't anticipating it, so they weren't exactly prepared. Weezer's garden flooded, soggy tomatoes and everything else, okay? More so importantly, it applied to Lucin, Utah as well recently. So whilst we looked on that Facebook post, Candice Cooley saying, we're always looking for Dylan. Have they been? Have the family been looking for Dylan recently with the floods? Do they even know that there are floods out there? And the risk and the possibilities that could lead to evidence being washed away, disrupted because of the flow of water in the washes, as like Candice Cooley has been focused on those type of areas. It makes you think, doesn't it? So with that going on recently and the possibilities it could happen again, more flooding, could be more chances of evidence being revealed, exposed, or moved on and harder to find, right? There's different possibilities. And it seems to stretch as far as Wyoming, right? So I don't know about other places, but with all this heavy rainfall here and there, flooding, people impacted in some way, whether it be searches for Dylan Rounds, traveling, simple as that, or living conditions. It can all be negatively impacted because of floods. Now, how does it impact Don Hatley, and why does it really matter? Well, before we go any further, I'm going to share with you a news clip of the area of Casper, how it looks most recent because of the heavy rainfall, and we'll go from there. Let me play you this clip. As you saw, it's fairly flooded in some areas. You look at the guys over there in the distance behind that car, the water's, I guess, up to their knees, if not slightly above. Sure, maybe in the distance the water isn't as bad, but in collective areas where it might dip down a little bit or near to a river, wash, it can be much worse, right? And this is just a singular part of Casper. It can range elsewhere. Just wanted to share this with you as like an example. Now, the reason why it can impact Don Hatley is because of where he lives. He lives in Casper, Wyoming. If Casper is impacted because of the flooding, then maybe Don Hatley's home is as well, or the family home is impacted too. That could be water damage. If it is that serious, which I don't know if it is, but if it was, it could lead to them having to move out and find temporary accommodation, or literally moving to a different house. You get what I'm saying? And why does that really matter? Because I'm sure some people could randomly say, oh, well, at least Don Hatley is suffering in some way karma because he's involved in the case, or he knows something, so it's good that things are going wrong for him. But, that aside, the reason why it's a negative is if it led to Don Hatley having to move once again to a different place, as far as an extreme to say a different state, does it get harder to track these people? I don't know, right? If Don Hatley is a key witness, do you want him to be all over the place? I don't know, because he might be harder to track down. And if you need him in time for a court case or court appearance and he's not easy to find, then it could be problematic in the justice for Dylan rounds, right? It's one way of looking at it. As well, sometimes with flooding, when it is fairly severe, it can impact people, right? It can, some people can pass away, and there's been fatalities because of flooding. Maybe it's because they're vulnerable, or the age, or if they're not quite mobile, but things can happen, right? People can be impacted and taken from the world. So if that happened to Don Hatley, that might be another potential secret taken to the grave. And do you want that? Because then it means there's less chances and options to go down when trying to figure out answers in the case overall. That's the way I would see it. Let me know your thoughts, what you think about it all. Do you think it's pretty problematic? You think that this flooding is pretty serious, that it could impact Don Hatley in a negative way, which could somehow indirectly harm the case of Dylan Rounds? Let me know your thoughts. And even just to revert back, Lucin itself, if it floods any more, then, it could disrupt potential evidence or Dylan's remains, right? We're still in June, right? There's still time for rainfall. And as Weezer said recently, seems to be more rain forecasted ahead. Now, anyone in the chat in those areas, living there or living nearby, let me know your thoughts on the weather. Is it as bad as it is? Is it worse? Or what's it like for you? Let me know. So yeah, hopefully you found this video interesting, found it somewhat easy to follow. As I said, if it seemed a bit heavy, full on at the start, it just had to be done getting through all those comments, okay? Not really been to that extent before. I'm sure it took the commenter quite some time to type out as well, but it might have cleared up some questions he had, okay? As well, the talk about the distance and all the different possibilities, it might seem a bit heavy, confusing right now, but you'll understand the title of this video. In the future, if we can do a focused, dedicated one, we will, and it'll be sharper, right? No harm in having rough patches, rough videos, if it's raw format, and then down the line, finalizing stuff, okay? So it'll be under control, okay? Maybe you found the other portion of this video interesting, like with the Facebook post, talks there, like Candice Cooley, as well as the weather further afar, right? Just goes to show all different places can be impacted with the rain, right? If anyone else within the area said you've seen the rain, feel free to share your experiences. If you do have any comments or questions, feel free to list them down below, and we'll see what happens next, of course. I was considering doing an Idaho 4 case, like a little news coverage there, but I was going to do it today, though, because of the length of this video and all the reading before. I think I've read enough for today, okay? So just re-energize and go from there, okay? So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I'll see you next time. But for now, goodbye and good night.